chair, putting my backpack close to the radiator and opening it up so that it could air. I bought my pint of lovely English ale, served just below room temperature, and so you can fully appreciate its flavour, and ordered a meal. Do I really need to say what it was? Of course not. We've just been there already, and there wasn't a fault. There wasn't a fault jogged en route. I returned to take my seat and enjoyed the bliss of being in civilization again. It was a lovely pub, and I had an ever so lovely seat by the window. I took my book out and began to read while I waited the delivery of my pie and chips, along with a few peas. A short time later, however, the barmaid came over to me and told me that because the kitchen had been so busy that evening, they'd actually run out of chips, and if I didn't mind, would they give me mash instead? What did she mean, if I didn't mind? She was offering me pie and mash, and I wasn't even in the East End of London, or even Essex. Top drawer, love, bring it on, I thought. And then I said that would be fine, as long as I could have some liquor. She looked at me with a confused expression. Obviously not getting a joke, and so I just left it by saying don't worry, and didn't bother to explain. Pie and mash have liquor. It's from the juices of the eels when they stew them. Yeah, anyway. Just with parsley, just in case you didn't get that. Right, there were a couple of local lads standing at the bar and chatting with the barmaid, and every now and then they would look over to me sitting there. They probably thought that I was a right sight, and sure enough, when I looked up and caught eye contact with them, they proceeded to give me a dig. Have you been swimming then? One of the lads asked, quite comically. No, just paddling, I quickly replied. We all laughed and went on to have a bit of a banter. And it was really nice. It was really nice of them to make the effort and acknowledge me. They were basically checking me out and inviting me into their conversation. But because of the day I'd had, I wasn't in the mood to talk, and I was grateful when my meal arrived and they politely left me to eat in peace. I really don't mean that to sound horrible in any kind of way, because they seemed good, quite really good lads who would have been fantastic company at any other time. It was just that in that moment I was in a mood to be quiet with my own thoughts, or the lack of them. It had been that kind of a day, but what it did do was further illustrate the fact that in a proper and civilised English pub, you're never a stranger for too long. Top drawer, I love it. After I finished my delicious meal, I decided to hold out in the pub until about 9 o'clock. It still looked pretty dismal out there, outside, and I was in no rush to leave the warmth of my surroundings. I studied my map to see if there looked like a reasonably good spot to camp close by. Just past the church in Boxley looked promising. There was a path leading in that direction of the Pilgrim's Way, and so I thought that heading in that direction would be the best bet. I got another pint and continued to read my book. The pub cleared pretty quickly as people finished their meals and departed. It seemed a shame, but that, I guess, is now the nature of things, because most people drive to the pub and can no longer stay and have a drink after their meal. At a time of just around 9 o'clock, I finished my pint and went over to the bar in order to ask the barmaid if she could refill my bottles with water. She happily did so, and then I asked if it was possible to purchase some milk, as I needed some from breakfast and tea in the morning. She said it wasn't, and so I didn't push the matter. But then another local, middle-aged fellow became a bit nosy about where I was off to. Where are you staying tonight? He asked in a very nosy tone. I immediately knew where this was heading, and I now welcome you to the world of the British nosy Parker. In case you're not from the British Isles or from its former English-speaking colonies around the world, I'll enlighten you further about the type of person that this phrase describes. Basically, a nosy Parker is someone who intrudes in other people's affairs when it doesn't concern them, and for their own self-centred sense of self. They do not wish to help others in a situation they are poking their nose into for the benefit of the person or people involved, but rather wish to find out about a situation for their own voyeuristic ends, and if that situation may affect them, even in the slightest, in some way, then they go into stage 2 of their nosy parkiness, and attempt to manipulate the situation in order to impose their own judgmental and limited will. In short, they are the type of people who attempt to tell other people what to do when it is not their place to do so. Is that crystal? Sorted. Do you recognise that description? I'm sure they exist all over the world, but they are not people who are very well respected in England. However, we seem to have more than our fair share of them. And from the tone of this fellow's voice, it appeared I was standing right next to one in that moment. Oh, I'm camping, I said, being polite but also giving away as little information as possible, as I possibly could. What, the campsite down the road? He continued to ask. What are you up to? In a what you up to tone of voice. I saw that on the map. Is it alright there? I said, being truthful, but without answering his question. I don't know, I guess, he replied. He then immediately started giving me directions to the campsite and telling me how to get there from where I was. I didn't ask. But the thing was, his directions were not in a tone of voice that was telling me how to get there in order to be helpful. He was actually using a tone of voice that was telling me to go there. As a result, I didn't listen to a word he said and I just nodded my head thinking, you're a twat, you're a twat, you're a twat. and much like one of the scenes from The Office when Tim had enough of Gareth's self-importance patheticness and said to him, you're a cock, you're a cock, you're a cock. It's a bit late to get there now though, he stated in the same tone without any sense of caring about my well-being. Well, you never know, I replied, and then goodbye then, have a nice evening, very quickly while sticking my thumb up as if it was my middle finger. Okay, you'll notice I didn't tell the fellow where to go during that brief encounter, and that's because I've learned with these type of people there's no point. All they do if you do that is turn a situation they've created on its head and make it look like you're the aggressor or the troublemaker. So it's not worth it. In life, I've found that the best way to deal with those nosy Parker types is to play them at their own game and then beat them at it. And you do that by giving away as little information as you can and cutting off the avenues of their rude and ignorant questioning. It's simple really, because in effect, they are usually very simple people. I then thanked the barmaid again for the water top up and she gave me a smile while giving a quick raise of eyebrows, as I think she detected the negative tone in the fellow's voice too. I left the pub and as I crossed the road to go towards the church, when I looked back I saw the man watching me from the inside of the bar. He'd actually walked to the window to spy on me and obviously knew that I was going to be camping wild, but I thought two things. Number one, in England, if you causing no harm to anyone, minding your own business and not disturbing the peace, then no one has the right to ask your business, not even a police constable. That's just how it is, and it's the law, common law, the law of the land. Number two, if the geezer did have a problem with anything he thought I was doing or was about to do, then he should have declared it straight out and not beat around the bush with his non-specific, judgmental tone and questioning. That kind of behaviour doesn't earn any respect with me. Where I'm from, if you've got a problem with someone, you go and have a word with whomever your problem is with. And if you don't have the decency to have a straight word with them, then you don't say a word. That's just how it is. And it's like that because it's a direct and honest way to go about your business. Clear, transparent communication. Job done, full stop, no misunderstanding. And that's why, in the moment when I looked around and caught the bloke having a butcher's look at me, I had no respect for him and I thought, who do you think you're looking at, twat? If you've got a problem with anything I'm doing, then come and have a word, or sit back in your chair. I'll be honest with you, and as you can probably tell, he and his big nose wound me up a little. I'm not perfect, and I never said I was. As I looked directly back at him and stared, I saw him turn and go back to the bar, and I then let my annoyance go and went to walk past the church. It was so picturesque passing through this way. There was a little avenue of sorts leading from the pub up to the church. As I found the trail, it took me around the outside of the churchyard and out into the fields beyond. I say that it was picturesque because it most definitely was. But looking out over the churchyard wall as I passed, it was a touch eerie at that time of the evening, as the dust was settling in, and after the long wet day, a light mist appeared to be forming around the gravestones. There was certainly a little bit of an atmosphere of forming in reality, and in my imagination, not in a scary Night of the Living Dead type of way, but more in the Shaun of the Dead. I mocked a ghostly woo to myself. I made myself smile. I couldn't believe that anything horrible could ever happen in a little village as beautiful as Boxley. But then I thought, that's how all the films start. And I decided to walk a bit faster. I was in full-on campsite search mode, and I wasn't looking for the one I had seen on the map. As I walked further and further away from the village, I felt more comfortable about the pitching possibilities. I was walking through some open grassland and fields. Some spots that I'd already passed looked pretty enticing, but they were just too close to the possibility of being disturbed by a nosy parker. The bloke had actually made me feel a bit more vigilant than normal, and I wondered if he had, in fact, been a farmer and that he was just looking out for his own land. And that would have been fair enough, but there is another thing that I do just in case that kind of circumstance arises. If a farmer ever does discover me and is not happy about my presence in his field, then I always have a Bank of England £10 promissory note standing by in my pocket just in case it's required. I always figure that if a landowner is grossly put out by the liberty of me staying a night in his or her field and isn't convinced by my polite explanation, that I can always offer the note by way of compensation. I think of it as a gesture of goodwill, and I believe that to be fair. Just as the light was finally about to fade, I found a spot in a wide open field. It was overlooked by a house in the distance, but I decided that it was okay. I quickly began my evening routine, left the burner for cooking, and settled in for the night. I was right on the public footpath, and I couldn't see how anyone would have a problem with me being there. But if there was a problem, please refer to the above. I was pleased to discover that the land had drained quite well since the fall of the rain earlier, and that it felt ever so soft as I got into my bed and lay down. This is nice and flat, I thought, and then I nodded off to sleep. Right, that's that day. Just show you in the distance that grass that fell down. And thank you, Brian. That's love. Just where those people just walked down. Right. God bless. Thank you, Brian.